Right, let's just give you another little example. All around the world I meet people that come out with these languages that have had encounters, and it's been fascinating for me because I've wanted to understand more. And again, it's like joining the dots. Dana Redfield is an author of 5 books. 2 of them were about her encounters. Sadly, she's not with us anymore. But Dana I communicated with a number of times. She lived in America. 2 of her books, Summoned and The Human ET Link, were about her experiences. And I sent her a DVD of Tracy speaking, and she said to me, when Tracy began to speak in the musical language, I spoke along with her, almost as if I were engaging in a 2-way conversation, which was quite incredible to her. I have had many people come to me that have heard some of the languages and say, I do that too, but I never ever talk about it.
Este chroma pele, shonti asena erhano, chlanti afele koma, entame asena chroma, telia fonti asen.
Nikor rigatsko lekatian ko barketia. Moko harake nokor tsikat kitya kol otkia akulagma. Tsigia tikare hafu shnikri. Iski et karaki. Maka leginiko.
Many different drawings and artwork. I've got a great deal more than this, in fact files of it, where they download it without any conscious thought, and it seems not in trance, but they have an amazing feeling of connection to it. So let's see what Tracy again says about this. The language is a more accurate representation of an individual soul vibration. It means that the language comes directly from the essence of the universal mind or God, which ultimately links all of existence together. The spoken sounds of a particular language tend to bypass much of the linear, logical aspects of consciousness. Therefore, there's no input from the conscious mind. The language has no structure and is therefore not related to the past in any way. Therefore, in its purest form, before it becomes vocal, it bypasses linear space-time. Which is quite interesting, isn't it? The language is a creation of the soul in a way that directly connects with the soul of another unconsciously. There is no framework, as the interpretation of the sound vibration is instantaneous and cannot be accurately interpreted into English or any other language spoken at this time. It's teaching us to communicate with our soul and the souls of others. This is one of the steps from words to telepathic communication.
These languages, blocks of information comes through, and to translate it into our tongue would take quite some time. Often you would need to fill a whole house with encyclopedias to actually translate a message that may be relayed in this tongue in a few seconds. A sample that is close in vibration to ours is this one. Yomeratus embra kisendra, wali aven ojindra. This means that we are reaching a stage in our evolution where chance is no longer as we imagine it. Everything has a place, and we are now drawing all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, and we are recognizing our part.
Our part in the universe is what she's saying. So what Rochelle is talking about there is not only the fact that she is aware of her own star child dual consciousness, but she is aware of what many of the languages are about, in the sense that not all of them can we translate in normal ways. It's just like using the concept of the word Christmas, for example. Christmas immediately brings in all this other information, from Christmas trees to what you cook for dinner, to the parcels and everything, but it's just one word, and it's similar to that, only a lot more complex. The symbols and script are the ancient forms of communicating volumes of information without having to read pages and pages. And these I call compressed files, and I think there's a very important reason why they're being downloaded at the moment into many of these individuals. So I believe that the possibility is that we're being assisted to go from verbal communication to telepathy. And one of the ways of explaining that is what Chris Hale talks about. She says this: for example, in lectures, when the lecturer is in full flight teaching and his or her mind is completely open to students, I found I could just go into their mind and absorb the concepts directly. I'm not primarily listening to their words, but in their mind with them, extracting the concepts myself. This circumvents a lot of misunderstanding. I feel these refined children are doing the same. I have taught, have made sure my mind is completely open while speaking. There was thought transplanting going on. My bank of information was merged with theirs, and they re-schematized their own knowledge systems accordingly. Of course, symbols would be the written conduit for this, like in non-literate societies, say of ancient Greece, where the mystical knowledge could only be passed on face-to-face by an adept teacher. But ancient symbols hold the conceptual keys that trigger within the observing mind without a teacher being present. What is happening with people, kids, who have these experiences is more a different way of learning than our generally accepted linear way of learning, reading pages and pages. This is an extension of our symbol trigger mentioned by Tracy. So make of that what you will.
Can you tell us what you're writing?
Sure. It's really like translating information that has been lost, information that was known by ancient civilizations. I'm not able to give you a more accurate description of this writing. My style is really like a shorthand, if you like. It's probably quite messy. But within each character, again, like the languages, it's really like a block of information in itself. If you were able to get three-dimensional, depiction of each character, because that's how I see each one, that would be much more accurate. With all the information that comes through me, I'm aware of it being multifaceted. When I do healing work, I also will see coding in the air, in the energy field, and I may see this coding in either numbers, like you may see mathematical configurations, or I may see them as dots, or I may actually see them as portals. There are many different ways that you can view them, or you can see them as sound. It's the same with the writing too.
And what are you feeling at the moment that you're doing it? What is the sense that you have?
I feel very happy when I'm expressing in these ways, when I'm expressing through what people might call ET languages or ET writing. It feels much more natural for me than many of the human forms of expression. I guess this has to do with my dual consciousness and the fact that for me it is really learning about being human rather than learning about being extraterrestrial.
Did you hear the last of that? It's more about learning to be human than being extraterrestrial. She's actually having to learn to be human, and that's what she's talking about. And one of the things that I haven't included here is I asked her how she read this kind of script, and she was describing that she puts her hand over the top of it and reads it like a kind of barcode with her hand. And what does that 5-year-old little boy do? Exactly the same thing. Again, what I found with others, like Dana in America and many, many others, they do a range of interesting, fascinating, complex drawings. These are some of Dana's. I won't go into the explanation here because they're actually on my first presentation. So I'm just really wanting to give you some idea of the complexity of some of the artwork. which certainly is showing some things going on with these individuals in terms of what experiences they're having in their encounters. And of course, coming out with the strange scripts. I see so much of this. It's sort of, I've got files of it from people from all over the world. But some of it is very similar, some of it is quite different. This is some of Dana's, and she has a fascinating understanding of them as well. This is more of her work. And this is one of Tracy's. As you can see, it is very busy, but it's also quite fascinating to see that each tiny bit of it seems to hold a great deal of information. And this is where I'm talking about the complex files. Now, Tracy also did black and white ones. Actually, to the right of you there, you'll see this strange image. This was something that Tracy did probably about 6 or 7 years before she went to Egypt. And she said that this particular one was particularly fascinating to her. And let me just explain what she said about it. She said that this was at Karnak and Luxor, and she knew immediately she took this image with her that it would fit. And she was not only talking about the pyramids being conscious energetic amplifiers and focusing power source, she also said, I knew that this would fit from a distance. I knew it would fit because I had a strong feeling to take it with me. And then she said the reason that she had drawn that particular image was this. Horus came to me in a dream. I was in an underground cavern or cave. He was showing me some Egyptian hieroglyphs on the wall. This one was carved into the wall with his snake's tongue. And then he grew in size, and I was above the ground looking at this symbol with hills and sunrise in the background. It's a sacred symbol from ancient times to help us awaken and remember who we are, which I found quite fascinating. These are some more of her drawings of how she understands the pyramids and other ancient sacred sites. So I'm now going to show you what seems to happen very much.
Hi, my name is Rochelle D'Elia. I've been consciously aware of my extraterrestrial contact now for 8 years, but I've been having contact my whole life. My experiences with extraterrestrials have been quite varied. I have gone through a process now over the past 8 years, and I've come through a lot of the traumatic aspect. And now my experiences have brought me many rewards, particularly in the way of healing abilities, and I myself have changed in a positive way through them. I have a lot of help with healing work. I speak in many different ET languages, and I also write in alien script. These abilities all come quite naturally to me.
How were you aware of the fact that you could heal, and what is your understanding of the healing that you do?
The healing work that I do now has changed and evolved over the years. It first began when I had an experience. I was drawn to go outside of my house at about 3 a.m. and I was looking up at the moon, and when I was looking at the moon I felt quite strange and felt to close my eyes. When I closed my eyes I felt lots of different sensations. I felt cool air being blown on my eyes and on my fingertips. I had pin-pricking sensations all over my face. I had the sensation of wind circling my head, and I could feel it clipping my nose as it went past. I also had sound waves that were going into my ear from a great distance, and these repeated over and over. I had tingling sensations all around my head as well. This process went on for some time, and when it stopped I felt I could open my eyes again, and I felt quite heavy in my body, as if there was someone else in my body. I was then drawn to go inside and lie down on my bed, and when I lay down on my bed I actually started to perform some sort of surgery on myself. I'd never done this before. I'd never had any experience of healing work either done on myself or performing it on others before. So I had my hands away from my body, and the healing involved minute movements of my fingertips. I was using my fingers, or they felt as though they were pulling what you imagine to be puppet strings. That's what it felt like. And I would have a series of consecutive movements, and I could feel the work going right through and penetrating through my organs. I would then hold my fingers sort of locking a position in place, and then I would use a series of very specific movements of the muscles in my eyes, which would then unlock or release this pressure. I had to actually move my body into different positions to access all the parts of my body. As the years went by, the healing work that I was doing actually changed, so I was using my whole hand instead of just my fingers. I wasn't actually using my eyes as much consciously, and then later on I started using toning. I was intuitively guided to use toning, and then later language came through. After the languages came through, then I started using a combination of toning and language, and songs came through. I can best explain these as being songs that are used for the soul to recognise. Souls may remember these songs from other planets, other lifetimes, and they help the individual to feel comfortable for the particular healing work to take place. Really they're used as you might use a lullaby to help a baby go to sleep. It helps them to relax. Or a chant is used to switch off the mind and help one to go into an altered state.
What Rochelle's doing there is actually talking about healing and about the fact that she found after an experience with the moon, and the moon is very important here because a lot of people talk about the moon being around or a very big moon. My suspicion is it's not the moon at all, that it's actually one of the craft. But she talks about having experience where she was drawn outside and felt these strange sounds going into her hearing, to her ears. And when she went inside, she started to do strange movements, which she called psychic surgery, on herself. After that, she was drawn into healing, and she uses toning, she uses different sounds. And what's fascinating about it is that she has a really complex understanding of what she's doing. I work to retune, like I use a tuning fork, like you would a musical instrument. I do this by bringing in the frequencies the person most needs at the time, both sound and coloured symbols, as we are multidimensional in nature. Now, some of this is going to perhaps confront some of you, but I want you just to...
When I work as a healer, I switch from how I normally operate as my human self to my ET self. It might sound a bit strange, but I have been given information about my dual consciousness. I can best describe this as coming into this vehicle having both ET and human characteristics. My human self is very sensitive, very emotional. My ET self is very clinical, very practical, very matter-of-fact. The healing work that I do, I'm operating in ET. It is really like operating as a surgeon. I see very clearly in the energy field the problem, and I fix it. There's no room for emotional involvement. My personality steps aside, and I hear where the energy field is out of tune. I don't hear in the way that we normally hear. I hear with another sense, if you like, that we don't normally use. there'll be certain places in the energy field that will be out of tune, and I work to retune, almost like you would use a tuning fork to hear when a musical note is in tune. How I do this is by bringing in the frequencies that the person most needs at the time. I do this through sound and colour, and quite often symbols come through with the sounds that I translate as well. The symbols are multidimensional in nature. They're not like normal shapes that we are used to. I work with a team usually of about 6 to 10 different beings that help me, and my team actually changes as I do. Usually I don't like to name the beings that I work with or identify them. I think for me it's just important that I'm aware of their energy more than anything else. But they will give me a name if it helps me to feel comfortable and more familiar with them. The client usually will feel relaxed after a session. Usually they will feel more balanced. Quite often they will leave their body, or I will, I guess, be aware that they leave their body during the session. They may be aware that they've fallen asleep, but it's actually quite different, and they usually leave at exactly the same time during the session. It's usually about half an hour into the session that they leave. This is so deeper work can take place without their conscious mind being involved.
So, for some of you, I'm pretty certain that will confront you a little bit. So I found this really interesting because I've talked to many people that do energy work that have had encounters. What draws them into it? And Tracy talked about being aware of energy in her hands when she was 15. So I wanted to understand more of not only the language and the depth of their understanding of it, and I'm going to go into that in a minute. I've been looking at science because my background's nursing midwifery. I still need to quantify that in third-dimensional terms that make sense to me. And I found something really very interesting. And this is to do with some recent Russian research, which was actually translated into German, is the work of von Graesner-Fozar and Franz Bludov. And it suggests that our DNA can be influenced and reprogrammed by words and frequencies, without cutting out or replacing single genes. And the geneticists and linguists have found that DNA is not only responsible for the construction of our bodies, but serves as a data storage, and in communication follows the same rules as language. It just requires the right frequencies. Now what we're hearing here is that somehow or other some language actually can alter DNA. Now what are these, a lot of these individuals telling me? That they use language, tones, they're using sound to heal. To me, what's the difference? There's something else with that. What they also said was that the nature of DNA are like holographic computers. Information can be transmitted by vibration and frequency. They call wave genetics. They've also found DNA can cause disturbing patterns in a vacuum, producing magnetized wormholes. These are tunnel connections between entirely different areas of the universe through which information is transmitted through space and time. DNA attracts this information, it passes into our consciousness, hypercommunication, in a state of relaxation. Now listen to what Rochelle says is her understanding of what she's doing.
I'm very relaxed, very at ease. Like a lot of things have been taken off my shoulders.
The beings that were working with me were wanting to demonstrate how the different areas in the body actually interact. So when I was placing my hands across and pointing out different sections of the body, this was for the audience as well as for you, it was just showing how each part of the body is not independent of any other area. They all work together, and it's important that we recognise this, see the body as a whole. There are particular titles that are given to each part of the body that are related with vibrations, and by expressing the title or the name, as you would say, it actually activates that area. They also have links with different energies from planets and dimensions. So if you like, we're imagining that the body is the universe and all the planets from our solar system and all others exist within this. So we are making them all work together. And within each chakra, all of the planets exist. So we are just activating the appropriate planets for this particular vessel at this time. Others will be activated at other times, but they all exist within each chakra. And each chakra is also multidimensional in nature. It is not, as we imagine, just 7 chakras, but each has many layers.
Well, I find that really interesting when we're looking at what we know about DNA now, or at least what these researchers are indicating with DNA. So, let's take this one step further. I have been really interested from my nurse midwife days on why we have this DNA mystery of ours. Not only have we 223 genomes in our DNA that is a sideways insertion of genetic material that did not come up through the invertebrate phase of our evolution, that is also part of, which actually contains everything to do with higher psychological functioning. Where did that come from? That in itself is a mystery that many people are exploring. But what I was also interested in is some of the latest research in terms of a DNA mystery, in terms of our junk DNA. What is being said is that, first of all, we only use 1/5 of our brain. Why is that? We have 3 billion base pair genomes in the genetic code, but only 60 million are active. Why? This information they carry is never read. We only exist on 3% of our DNA. A group of researchers working on the Human Genome Project made an astonishing discovery. They believe the so-called non-coding sequences, which is 97% in human DNA, are no less than a genetic code of unknown extraterrestrial life form. This is Professor Chang, the group leader. What we see in our DNA is a program consisting of 2 versions, a big code and a basic code. The complete program was positively not written on Earth, he believes. He says the genes by themselves are not enough to explain evolution. No creator, be it programmer from Mars, Microsoft, would not leave a program without an option for improvement or upgrade. The upgrade is already enclosed in the junk DNA. He suggests that it's nothing more than a hidden, dormant upgrade of our basic code. We already know that certain cosmic rays have the power to modify DNA. So it is plausible, he says, that the extraterrestrial programmers may just use one flash of the right energy from somewhere in the universe to instruct the basic code to remove its blocks and fuse itself to the big code. That would change us forever. Some of us within months. There'd be no more cancers, diseases, and a short life, and would catapult us intellectually. The comparison would be the difference between the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnons. This complete program is elegant and self-organizing, auto-correcting software for a highly advanced biological computer. The difference between a short diseased life and potential for a super-intelligent super being with a long and healthy life. So what about the downloads, the scripts, the language, the crop circles? Is this part of the energetic upgrade via our DNA? Remember, we're talking about a flash of the right energy. So what are these as part of that upgrade? Are these part of us waking up? Are they helping us to wake up? Are these the ancient symbols that are actually assisting this process of evolution? Certainly, many people are affected by them, not just because they're amazing to look at, but when are inside them feel all sorts of very powerful frequencies, including healing. And Freddie Silver, in his book Secrets in the Field, suggests that could it by implication be that the crop circles are a universal language? We keep hearing that word. But what else are they doing? Hold on, I'm going to stop that just for a second. So we're looking at the potential here that in some way, possibly, those compressed files or downloads, I wonder, and I'm only wondering, whether in fact those compressed files in fact are the new software for the new computer. That when we finally get switched on, if that's what Professor Chang is talking about, we're going to need a new operating software. I wonder if, in fact, these downloads are compressed files and the new software for the new computer. I really don't know, but it's an interesting thought. Now, just before I go any further, I just want to give you an overview of this. We're actually doing very well for time, so I might even be able to answer some questions. Suzanne Hansen is a very dear friend of mine who's had experiences all her life. She's a former teacher. She now runs UFocus New Zealand and has had many conscious experiences. She's been taken aboard craft many, many times. She's also been shown her children on the craft. And she's going to confront some of you that perhaps still feel that a lot of the Zetas and Greys are in fact robotic-like creatures, because that's not been her experience. And it's not been the experience of many of my clients. Now, I can't go on other people's research, and I have no intention of going into their research, because I don't actually know how they've worked, or their clients, or anything like that. I only know what my clients are telling me. So I'm only going, for this moment, in terms of the understanding they've given me of what they understand about these beings. One of the things that Suzanne has told me is that when she's on board craft, she has particular connection to some Zetas. She knows them well. And she said, and they have a sense of humour. And she said, apart from that, she has found them to be extremely loving, extremely compassionate, and extremely kind. And one of the incidents in regression that she told me when she was learning things on the craft to use her mind, was when one of the beings was accompanying her down back home, and she said the being in his mind showed her that he was sending an etheric arm around her to let her know that he was with her and he was looking after her. And it was his way of showing that he was caring for her. And she perceived this, and to show what she had learnt, she sent an etheric arm round him, and he acknowledged the fact that she'd learnt well. Now, these are really interesting little details. She even talked about, from this experience, that when she was being told she was going to meet someone special, she described skipping along the corridor behind the little being, and how the being was highly amused. So because you don't see the face move, you don't need to, because everything is in the mind melds and in the telepathy. Now, this is a particularly fascinating experience that Suzanne had. She was told to come and see me and have a regression. She flew over from New Zealand to Perth. Not exactly cheap, but she was told that this was one, she shouldn't have any come in with any mandate, any particular experience. She had to be open to what we explored. So this was totally, in any way, not a conscious experience. But I want to demonstrate something I believe, very profound.
My name is Suzanne Hansen, and I'm the director of a New Zealand UFO sighting and contact research network called UFocus NZ. I have experienced contact with extraterrestrial species since early childhood. Today I will describe two directly related experiences on board craft, which demonstrate how some souls are altered, educated and fostered by ET species as a part of ongoing constructive programs and agendas for the future benefit of mankind.
In 1962, when I was 8 years old, I was taken on board a craft and into a large familiar room that I had visited often with other human children. Here we learned to interact and socialise comfortably and competently with other species of ET children, using enhanced telepathy and sentiency. On this occasion, I was taken aside by an adult grey and asked if I'd like to meet another child somewhere on board the craft.
Before I go any further, I just want you to be aware of the little cradle that you're seeing in this picture. And that particular cradle, when Suzanne first saw it, she burst into tears. And she says, I know that cradle. And she described the fact that when she had a very difficult childhood, that when she'd had a particularly traumatic time on Earth with her human family, she was put on that cradle, and it actually had certain frequencies that would rebalance her energy field. And she burst into tears because she had been shown such compassion and such love.
The grey telepathically conveyed thoughts, pictures and explanations to me regarding this child and its life. But the volume of information was too great to retain consciously, and I was just left with an overall impression regarding meeting a new friend. The grey told me about the child with considerable care and I sensed there was something he was not yet telling me, but he was seeking my cooperation with this meeting. We proceeded to a small room and waited, and I felt excited about meeting a new friend. 2 greys entered the room, with a vibrant blue ball of light floating in the air between them. As I stared at the ball in surprise, having expected a child to arrive, I experienced profound feelings of love and familiarity, and sobbed at these unexpected thoughts. The grey told me I would love this ball of light in the future, as it would become my son. He referred to it as both a source and a complex system, and said I had known it since before my own birth. The grey began an intense mind-to-mind download consisting of 3 streams of information. The first just calmed my emotions and confusion. They wanted us to get to know each other, future mother and son, and they would observe how we related to each other. A second stream embedded extensive information into my subconscious concerning the purpose of this project, the genetics involved in the creation of my son's body, and the dual education he would receive on board craft, both as a child and in his source or soul state, which he told me had been enhanced and altered by them for a specific purpose. Finally, a third stream brought my mind back to the present as an 8-year-old child, and they left me to play with the ball for a while. I tried to relate to the ball by first asking it to bounce, but it just floated there, unresponsive. I felt disappointed and sat down on the floor. Suddenly, I felt as if I was being watched and became aware the ball was thinking at me. It descended down onto my shoulder, and we were soon racing around the room, communicating happily. But, all too soon, the greys returned. They expressed satisfaction that the meeting had gone well. 2 of them took the ball of light away, and I felt deep sadness and longing. The grey assured me that we would meet again many times up until the day that this son would be born. So we returned to where the other children were interacting. In 1983, now aged 28 years old and near to full term in my first pregnancy, I was taken on board craft. My memory begins with me being assisted down a corridor by 2 tall entities, a mixture of species. They expressed concern for me as I had been ill throughout the pregnancy, and so they tenderly supported me as we entered a small room. They helped me onto a shelf-like bed, and we were joined by a grey. He explained that they were bringing someone to merge with me, and I was not to be concerned as everything would be fine. Holding his hand over my forehead, he told me he first needed to retrieve some memories from my subconscious mind, which had been embedded there in childhood. Immediately, my mind was filled with images, emotions, and memories of past meetings associated with a ball of blue light, and I became really tearful as I realised it was the soul of my child soon to be born. As he calmed my emotions, a group of ET children came into the room, bringing with them the now familiar soul or ball of energy. He stated these young entities had grown up on board craft with this soul, and they would play an integral part in supporting him in his life. There was a real air of excitement as the process of merging began. The grey slowed my metabolism right down to prepare my body for the intense energy of the soul, necessary to prevent shock to my body. During the hypnotic regression with Mary, my voice became really slow and almost indistinguishable at this point, and my body felt cold and numb. Slowly the soul entered my body and the body of my child-to-be. I felt infused with light and weightlessness as the grey slowly brought my metabolism back to normal again. He stated my son would be born late, which he was, and that he would be accompanied through his life by watchers, a terminology to describe a protective system they would provide for him. He added there are thousands of children being born in a world like him, part of an extensive project to create positive changes and accelerated evolution from within the human species.
These 2 experiences illustrate the complexity in the soul state and reveal extraterrestrial involvement with souls incarnating on this planet for specific purposes. It challenges us to reassess our current understanding of the soul's existence before incarnation, and the idea that the soul evolves not just through repeated cycles and lifetimes of personal experiences, but can also be enhanced, altered and educated by external forces or species.
And I will just say that again for you. These two experiences illustrate the complexity of the soul state and reveal extraterrestrial involvement with souls incarnating on this planet for specific purposes. It challenges us to reassess our current limited understanding of the soul's existence before incarnation, and the idea that a soul evolves not just through repeated cycles or lifetimes of personal experiences, but can also be enhanced, altered and educated by external forces or species. Now this is going to, for some of you, I think, be quite a difficult concept, and I understand that. But what it seems to be suggesting to me, and obviously Richard Dolan talked about it yesterday, that we are not just perhaps looking at the fact that we're looking at extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, transcendentals, and perhaps even some from our own future. But the bottom line seems to be, as this 15-year-old that was seeing Uncle Ted and Grandad as orbs of light, that they are also part of this big picture of these beings that we are interacting with or having encounters with. And there seems to be far more going on than we ever thought. And there is the sense that there is no actual separation in that sense. I think one thing I want to say now is that the abduction, the so-called abduction scenario, I participated in a thesis by Simon Harvey Wilson that was the comparisons between shamanism and abductions in Western Australia in 2000. And what Simon discovered was the parallels were quite fascinating in terms of transformation, healing, etc., etc. And my sense is that what we're seeing is a modern-day shamanic experience where we are being challenged to transcend our fears, to be prepared for our multidimensional nature. And this is all part of that challenge. Are we going to go beyond our limited fears to actually accept and be prepared for working in through not only dimensions but beyond that? And this is what our new body perhaps is, and our new hard drive and our downloading is preparing us for. So it's actually challenging us from many, many levels. And some obviously don't need that kind of experience, because I'm seeing a broad range now of experiences from the 20 to 30% of the abduction or so-called abduction experience, in the sense that I will say so-called because for many of my clients, when I've taken them into hypnosis and I have asked their subconscious, have they on any level, consented to this part of their human experience? And not one of them yet has said to me, no. Most of them will tell me it was before they came here. And some of them have actually said, asked that question in that space themselves, and then described themselves as a ball of light. And some of them have also said that they were non-human before they came here. They were extraterrestrial, and they have undertaken to come to this planet to assist this planet to evolve. Now, it's not for me to judge that understanding or that experience. If this is what that individual, and I will say to them, does this make sense to you? Does it resonate? And every time they will say yes. But one of the things that was quite fascinating with one of the young ladies who was aware of her dual consciousness, she said to me, yes, I did, but she said the extraterrestrial part of me was cool with it. But she said the human part of me didn't realize it was going to be so hard, which is fair comment. But what I'm saying is this is only from their understanding with their subconscious. It's not for me to judge or assimilate or even try and in any way put any of my own thoughts and feelings with this. What I'm trying to do with my work is to give a person the understanding that makes sense to them in terms of understanding their own experience and reality. And the bottom line is that what I find is no matter how strange, weird it may be, even to being shown one of their parents not being human, which is pretty confronting for most people, and one of those was actually a policeman, by the way, Gary. It was quite challenging. So what's interesting for me is it's not something they would consciously want to say or even admit to, but they say to me on a deeper level, it actually resonates. And that's all that matters to me, is that it makes sense to them. What it allows them to do is integrate this experience and heal and move on and expand in their own way in whatever makes sense to them. So instead of actually being in conflict with their third-dimensional paradigm and trying to fit this experience into that box, they accept that they're operating on two levels of human experience, and once they can accept them both as being okay, they can actually grow with that, integrate, heal, and live normal lives and normalize it, which is very difficult in a world that denies their very reality. So with that, I hope I've given you something to think about. I also hope that you understand I'm not expecting you to take on board everything that I've shown you. All I would like to do is offer you what I'm learning and understanding from my 1,600 cases so far. And this is what I've put together as a way of myself trying to make sense of it. I have no idea how far I'm right up with this or not. But if anything makes sense to you, or if it even just incites your curiosity, then that is basically all I need to do. And I want to thank you all for being a wonderful audience. And I have got a chance for a few questions. So if you've got any questions, I'm quite happy to answer them.
But Mary, is it okay if you guys come down and get on the DVD?
I'd just like to ask, as you mentioned about the way some people you've dealt with pick up on a language, what sort of proportion of those actually learn it on board a ship or in some sort of artificial sort of ET-like environment, like some of the contactees that I've come across, and if not, how else do they sort of pick up the language?
It's a very interesting question. They've never actually talked to me about where they downloaded these languages. Some of them say it is a download and what have you. But interestingly, I met a gentleman who was English, who came to Perth, and he came to me about his experiences. And what he did say to me in terms of the telepathic part of that was that he'd actually lost his scout cap, which is his brand new cap, and he'd gone to the Scouts. And when he came home, he didn't have it, and he'd had a strange experience. And when we explored his experience, one of the interesting things he said to me was when he was up on the craft, everything he was hearing around him in his mind was a jumble. He said, but it was like I had to tune my mind to a frequency, just like you would a radio signal. And he said, and I could hear everything very, very clearly. He said, which was quite fascinating. It's the first time I'd heard that. Now, from what I can gather, it's all telepathic on the craft. But these seem to be downloadings, and the way Rochelle describes them as soul languages or universal languages. So if we take on board, and that's a big leap for some of you, I do understand, that perhaps some of these individuals that are now in human form actually came from other star systems or whatever, and they feel like their family is out there, and that's what they will tell me. You have to wonder whether or not this is from their origins. And I mean, this is really tangible stuff for them, because the emotional side of it is very profound. And many of them say, I don't want to be here, I don't like this place. It's not like home. And to give you an example of what a 5-year-old actually said about her understanding, she said to her parents, now this is terribly confronting to parents. She was 5 when she said this to her mother. She said, "You're not my real parents. My parents are in space." And her mother, thankfully, had been aware of her own experiences and so was able to sort of honour what her daughter was saying. So she said to her daughter, well, if that's so, she said, I don't really look like this, her 5-year-old daughter said. And her mother said, well, what do you look like then? Could you draw it? And she said, no, because you'd be frightened. Now, we're talking about a 5-year-old girl. I have heard this so many times from different people saying, I feel like I've been adopted. My family doesn't feel like my real family. And even though I love my family and my parents, I feel I don't belong. I feel I belong out there. And there will be people in this room that relate to that, absolutely. Now, are they crazy? Are thousands of people crazy that are feeling like that? Or is it in fact telling us something that we need to be aware of? You know, and that's all I'm putting to you. So I hope, as I say, I can't give you any more than that. Okay. Oh, hi.
Hello, Mary.
Hi.
I came up today because I was very anxious to hear you above all the other speakers who I've heard already, and they're all excellent and got lots to tell us. But I think you've got a very special package of information to give us. And I have to say, having downloaded it, my head is hurting a bit. And I'm trying to sort of fit together in my own head all the threads that have already been there, and then feed in the new ones to come through you. I'm involved in a project to actually prove the physical existence of greys on this planet, which I regard as a very important stage in us being able to prepare our minds to take in the new information. And that's just by the by. It happens to be called the Star Child Project, so there's a plug for the Star Child Project. But what interests me is what I picked up, and I'm a little bit muddled because so much of the new stuff has come in, is this interaction between the beings on their ships out there and us here, the humans. Because I think it's very important that we actually start to think about what it means to be human. And what I got from you, I couldn't quite remember where it came from, it was Michelle talking about it. Sue, I think it was Michelle. She was saying that they actually come to us because they need to experience the human side of them. And I feel this fits in very much with a process which is going on now on the planet, of which the information about the aliens, the physical existence of the aliens is part. But it's also what I would call human self-realization. It's actually finding out that we are a species in its own right, and not just some sort of evolutionary or genetic accident, or even the sort of, I don't know, there's all this stuff about the Anunnaki and how it actually came into existence at all. You know, that we are a slave species originally, and a subspecies and a lesser species, and we could actually be a super species. And so I want you to comment on that.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do feel that, you know, and there's a lot of differing opinions about, you know, why they're doing this and what's their agenda, and are we actually just ultimately going to become biological fodder, and they're going to take us over and all the rest of it. And I think I'm a pretty logical kind of a person. And the way that I look at it is this. If they are taking us onto these craft and teaching us cosmology and all the different things about the origin of the species, teaching us how to use our minds, teaching us how to heal, and all those things, why would they bother if they're going to take us out? Or just why don't they just leave us alone? And let's face it, we're doing a pretty good job of taking ourselves apart anyway. So for me, it doesn't seem very logical, unless there's something I'm missing here, to bother to help the new human, if you like, to grow and expand and change and become multidimensional, unless there is something else going on here. And I certainly can't see it would be ultimately to take over the species. I do believe that they have a lot of programs, and some of those are to do with us, but some of those are to do with understanding themselves. And I will just give you, as part of that answer, a gentleman that just recently I did a regression with, and he was taken up onto a craft, and he told me that the craft was 32 miles long. And then he said he saw thought forms in a kind of aquarium. And he said to the beings, "What is this?" And they showed him some technology which apparently creates a kind of wormhole into other universes. And they said, "What we're doing with you is what we're doing in other universes. We seed other universes and we create, just as you will do one day." Now, you can take that or leave it as you will, but it seems to me that if they've bothered to change and alter our genetics and gradually enhance our abilities in the way that they're doing so that we can become multidimensional, why would they bother if it wasn't an agenda which seems to me to suggest we are being helped to change and to grow and to understand our multidimensional and the magnificent nature of what we could be, because I believe we all have the potential for that. And perhaps, just perhaps, they're giving us a helping hand, and I believe, from what I've seen so far anyway, that's the case.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mary Rodwell, thank you so much.